The impacts of climate change on freshwater systems with ChloeBright and Akash.
So people rely on freshwater systems for everyday life, yet the human race is one of the main causes of the depletion of these systems. An increase in greenhouse gases due to human activity is the main reason for climate change. Climate change is not just making the weather warmer, but affects freshwater systems everywhere. So freshwater systems only comprise of 2.75% of the Earth's total water supply, and 75% of that fresh water is stored in glaciers. So one of the main causes of climate change is the greenhouse gases warming effect, and this is caused by the sun's radiation penetrating the Earth's atmosphere and being trapped. So it's almost the same effect as a greenhouse. So as you can see here, it's reflected by the atmosphere and then it's trapped by the gases. And one of our contributions, like our anthropogenic contributions, is that we produce more and more CO2, which gets stored in the Earth's atmosphere and makes it harder for the sun's radiation to escape once it bounces off the Earth's surface. So the more we produce CO2, nitrogen...
The increase in the Earth's temperature is going to cause negative impacts on the hydrological system, causing more unpredictable precipitation events, which will impact the environment by making drier soils, less groundwater replenishment, increased runoff, and release of toxins due to the increased runoff.
The climate change affects the hydrological cycle because as the Earth becomes warmer, it raises the Earth's capacity to hold moisture, which in turn causes more humidity. The increase in humidity makes the hydrological cycle more unpredictable by causing more intense precipitation events and longer periods of drought. This is the reason for drier soils and less groundwater replenishment. Since groundwater replenishment is dependent on precipitation events in the recharge areas, this is predicted to only get worse, which will slowly deplete our potable groundwater supply in the near future. A predicted increase in global temperature will also cause an increase in freshwater temperature. This will negatively affect the habitat in these freshwater environments by causing a reduction of habitat for cool water species, which will cause them to die off or migrate to a different location. This could throw off the entire food web. The increase in temperature will also cause an increase in eutrophication, which is the biggest threat to freshwater systems due to the climate change. Eutrophication is caused by an overload of nutrients in a body of water. This causes harmful algae blooms which negatively affect the quality of water. Algae favors warmer waters. The increase in eutrophication causes changes in the thermal stratification of a lake because of the warming surface waters. The increase in eutrophication also causes an increase in runoff. May it be from the accelerated glacial melt from the increased global temperature or the patterns of precipitation. They both have the same effect. This effect is when more toxins are released from either sedimentation or are trapped away in the glacier, and as these melt and runoff picks up all these toxins, they are deposited into the lake, which has horrible negative effects on the lake.
So to support our thesis, we've decided to include a variety of case studies. So the first one that I found that really demonstrated the impact of climate change on our freshwater systems was a study conducted by researcher Christian Bogdal. He was a Swiss researcher that did research on Lake Oberar, and he chose to do the study on this lake because there was a catastrophic event in the 1990s when 90% of the water body surface area flooded over and completely destroyed the village. And he felt that this was a good place to start because the water showed and the area showed that there was a big contamination of DDT afterwards. So after examining the lake and researching and doing sampling, he found that during the Industrial Revolution, which was during the 1980s and the 1990s, there was a large use of DDT and improperly disposed chemicals in that area. And these were then frozen in glacial melt close to this area and lake and limnological runoff. And then in the early 2000s, when all these chemicals were banned, they thought that the correlation between the DDT and just like the improper dumping would stop, so they figured they would find less DDT and mercury. However, they discovered that there was actually an influx, and that PCBs, which are just another terrible chemical, polychlorinated biphenyls, I believe, which destroy aquatic life and marine life, were actually coming as well as with the mercury, and they were able to correlate this to the increase in temperature in that area, because everything that had been found in the early 80s from the improper disposal had frozen in the glacials near the area and was now melting into aquatic life and aquatic streams, and they were finding large numbers of ecological die-off, and benthic invertebrates were dying. They were finding less and less of them. And so this goes to show that climate change caused glacial melting and a release of DDT, mercury, and phosphorus into the water. So again, this caused freshwater systems to become eutrophicated. This also put mercury into the water, and it had a giant impact on ecological life. So one of the case studies that we also chose to do was the impacts of climate change on freshwater fisheries. So the study focused on the data collected by the GCMS, which is the Global Circulation Model. And they showed through the GMC predictions and data that the mean average global temperature would rise by 1 to 7 degrees in the next century. So they proceeded to correlate that the increased temperatures would decrease the dissolved oxygen levels available to fish in the water. It would also increase the toxicity of pollutants, because an increase in temperature means an increase in nitrogen as well as phosphorus, and that means the hydrological cycle is impacted. So this affects fish because fish are very sensitive metabolically, as well as this will affect their growth, their function, and it will cause a decrease in freshwater fish. We found that in lotic systems, an increase in groundwater temperature would affect the fish's habitat, so their quality of life. Therefore, migration patterns would change. A lot of times they won't be able to reproduce due to the high toxicity. And then in lentic systems, we found that it would affect the food web. So meaning availability of nutrients wouldn't be there, and so on and so forth. And it would also cause eutrophication and changes in stratification.
In conclusion, if changes are not to be made, the vicious cycle of the greenhouse gases will only increase. Simply just adapting to the climate change and the increase in temperature will only increase the amount of greenhouse gases produced, because it would involve changing the current water management practices and operation of the existing water infrastructure. An example of this includes water becoming more turbid due to increased eutrophication. To make this water more potable would have to involve a more extensive water treatment process. This will use more energy, therefore increasing greenhouse gases. So if the effects of global warming are not reversed, the impacts on freshwater systems will be a threat to human health and will potentially cause irreversible effects to aquatic ecosystems.